Hi YouTube, Watchify here with another video. In this video I'm going to go in depth with the new Citizen Promaster diver model, the gray dialed BN0167-50H. What's different about this one over the already well-known and popular black and blue dialed models, and what are its pros and cons? This watch was released in June of 2023 alongside a blue dialed BN0165-55L. Together, these two watches are supposed to be inspired by glaciers and ice caves. Of the two, I think the blue dial is getting the most interest, but for me, I like the understated gray version more. At first, I thought these watches were just JDM releases, but then I saw it was on Citizens USA website, which makes them easier to purchase for those in the US. The retail price of this watch is 450 US dollars. That's what you'll pay if you buy it direct from Citizen, but resellers on eBay, for example, are selling them for around $280 at the time of this video. And that's how I got mine. The more common black version is selling for $221 right now. So what are you getting for the extra $60? First off, this model comes on a stainless steel bracelet with solid end links and a milled scissor clasp, rather than the well-known Citizen rubber strap. The other interesting thing is this bracelet has a glide lock adjustment mechanism instead of the more common micro adjustment holes. More on that later. Case dimensions haven't changed from the older models, so you'll still get a 44mm case size, 11.5mm thickness, 48.7mm lug to lug, and a 20mm lug width. At 44mm, that would make you think that this watch is too large for most wrists, and it's certainly not a small watch, but I'd say it wears closer to a 42mm watch. That is especially true if you were to wear it on a strap. As you can see, the bracelet has male end links, so it turns the effective lug-to-lug distance to 53.3mm when on the bracelet. The sub 12mm case thickness also really helps out this watch in terms of its wearability. A downside with Citizen in general, and Orient for that matter, is that they're still not putting drilled lug holes on their watches, so strap changes will be a bit more difficult. The case itself is almost all done in a satiny finish, with only the notches in the bezel and the crown having polished elements. The finish work is pretty good for a watch at this price, and a good design choice for what is supposed to be considered a more utilitarian style diver. The crown is a good size and protrudes a bit past the crown guards. It has a good amount of pop when unscrewed, and it's always nice to see that signed ProMaster logo. Underneath the watch, you'll see the no-nonsense screw-down caseback, which mentions the Japanese movement, water and magnetic resistance, and how this watch was cased in China. It also continues the warning of service center repair only that I've seen on other Citizen Eco drives. The bezel insert design is unchanged and is still only a 60-click unidirectional rather than a 120-click. I'm only a desk diver, so I can't really tell what difference it makes to have a 120-click versus a 60-click bezel, other than maybe the 120-click has a smoother rotation, but rotation on this model feels fine to me. It isn't overly loud, and there is minimal backplay. Citizen hasn't departed from the material or design of the bezel insert here either. It's still aluminum with markers all the way around and a good sized lume pip at 12. The aluminum does have a glossy feel and appearance though, just like the older models, so I'm not sure what coating Citizen uses on it, but I can say these tend to scratch rather easily. The bezel insert color matches the dial and chapter ring pretty well on this watch, I might add. Atop the dial is a flat mineral crystal with no bevel on its outer edge. The only change from the more common models is that there is no AR coating on it, or at least Citizen doesn't mention it on their website, and I can't detect any. A lot of people are going to complain here about not having a sapphire crystal, and yeah, I would have preferred it, but it's not a deal breaker for me at this price considering the other features of the watch. I would describe the dial as a dark gray gunmetal-like shade, which I like. And having owned the black dial version, I wouldn't say they are too close in color. I've seen where some people say the color looks brownish in some lighting, and I can see why they would say that. The dial difference with this model is you get a sunburst effect now instead of a matte dial, and I like that change. You can't really even tell this is a solar watch, as I don't detect any transparency, and I think that's an area where Citizen excels. Indice shape and size are unchanged as they're still embossed and outlined in silver, but what does change is the lume. On this watch you're getting green lume throughout instead of blue on the indices and hands, and green for the bezel insert pip as before. I have mixed feelings about this change as I feel the lume is less bright, and I did enjoy having the dual color lume. But in daylight, I think this lume gives off a slight shade of green, which works well in combination with the gray dial color. The date window at 4 is still there, and it's outlined in white as before. The white date wheel remains hard to see if you have less than 20/20 eyesight, I feel, since it's so small. Wording on the dial is a printed Citizen logo up top with Eco Drive and Divers 200 meters below in white. The small text at the bottom of the dial reads Japan movement and the caliber number, along with some other numbers at the end that I'm not sure what they mean. Moving on to the hands is where we come across what I feel is another welcome change. Gone is the orange outlined minute hand, so now the hour and minute hand are a uniform brushed finish. The style and shape of the hands hasn't changed though, and the second hand remains white with a loomed arrow tip. These hands still provide good contrast against the dark dial. The chapter ring is also a dark gray with white minute marks. The movement is the same E168 Eco Drive movement as the other models. I still don't know what makes Eco Drive any different from other solar movements like Seiko's, for example. As far as I know, those watches can also charge from any light source, just like this Eco Drive. Regardless, I think Citizen did well with their Eco Drive branding. Basically, with these movements, there is a rechargeable battery cell or capacitor that stores the energy obtained from the solar cells. The life of the watch is pretty much however long that cell continues to work, which I hear is about 20 years. But you could get replacement cells from Citizen if you ever needed one. Besides that, the movement has the standard quartz accuracy rating of plus or minus 15 seconds a month, which I have always found to be on the plus side. It's a reliable and proven EcoDrive quartz movement, so I think Citizen felt there was no need to make any changes with this model. In terms of quality control on the watch that I got, I don't have any major complaints about the bezel or chapter ring alignment, which is something I hear Citizen is somehow able to do better than Seiko these days. However, the second hand is striking slightly to the right of the chapter ring marks, which isn't the end of the world, but something that would have been nice if it had lined up perfectly. Definitely not a reason for me to be unhappy with the watch or want to return it, in my opinion. Finally, I want to talk a bit about the bracelet, as I think that's where this model is providing the most value. I mentioned earlier how this model is currently about $60 more expensive than the older black dial on the rubber strap. Some people like rubber straps, especially those that actually dive with these watches. However, I prefer bracelets. This one has a lot of things going for it and a couple of not so good aspects. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 22.6 millimeters to 19.6, at the clasp end, and the links are held together with pins and collars that aren't too difficult to work with. The clasp is 19.6 millimeters wide and has the Citizen logo pressed into the locking mechanism. I've never owned a bracelet with a sliding adjustment like this one, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but I find it to be useful for those on-the-fly adjustments that are sometimes needed, as one's wrist swells slightly due to the time of the day, temperature, or activity. It works simply by pressing forward on these two metal levers and sliding back to loosen the bracelet. To reverse that, you don't need to press on the metal tabs, just press from the other end. It's very convenient to operate as compared to having to use like a paper clip or other type of pin to remove a spring bar like on most of the affordable watch bracelets. I had to remove 5 links to get a good fit on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. And I found that with only 4 links removed, the bracelet wore too loose for my liking. I discovered that one of the downsides of this bracelet is that when the slide adjust is extended past the first notch, it really makes the bracelet jut out away from the wrist and it looks a bit awkward. And that is even with me having the 6 o'clock side of the bracelet shorter than the 12 o'clock side. I feel Citizen should have done a better job with the curvature here so that it stays closer to the wrist when extended. I guess someone could replace it with an aftermarket clasp with a slide adjust, but those look to be pretty pricey at over $60, and I'm not sure if it would wear any better than this OEM one. The bracelet also has a pretty big gap between the end link and the first link. Overall though, at least for me, I feel the value of the bracelet you get with this model is more than the $60 price premium you pay versus the older Promaster diver models. If you wanted to buy this bracelet separately, you would have to pay over $100. Of note is that this same bracelet has come on Promasters before, such as the black dialed BN0167-50H. So I know that was a lot of information on a watch line that's already well known and popular, but I wanted to dig into the small design differences with this watch in case you weren't quite happy with the older model's appearance and features. It seems like Citizen has been busy of late with releasing new models and variants. I did a previous video on one of the Fugu automatic divers that Citizen released last year, and I still enjoy having that watch in the collection. It was good to see Citizen finally get back to making automatics in the US market, as before everything they offered seemed to be eco-drive solars here. They recently released some 37mm Promaster divers which drew my interest, and I probably would have picked one up if they were just a bit larger. Oddly, Citizen markets them as women's watches rather than unisex. Along the way, Citizen has been adding some other variants to their standard size Promaster diver, and all the ones that I'm aware of, I'll go ahead and show on the screen. This Promaster Eco Drive line is popular for a reason. It's an attainable, well-built 200-meter diver, and with the Eco Drive movement, one that's accurate and always ready to go. In the looks department, it's not as fancy as some other offerings from Seiko and Orient, but I feel it's got a distinctive enough look to warrant consideration. It's also the kind of watch that looks good on a variety of strap types. I kind of regretted selling my black dialed version, and with that watch I felt it looked great on a 20mm engineer style bracelet. If the size of this watch doesn't scare you away, and you've been waiting for a new colorway that comes on a bracelet, I feel you can't go wrong with this Citizen Promaster, but I still stand by my opinion that they should have released a 40mm version. That's going to wrap up this video. If you found it helpful or interesting, feel free to leave a like, comment, or even consider subscribing. Of course, I wanted to thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in another video.